Welcome back. Great. I want you to picture this with me. You're in the grocery store, right? Standing in the poultry aisle. There's just tons of packaged chicken everywhere, and you're trying to make a good choice, an informed choice. But then you notice the labels, and honestly, they seem like they're almost designed to confuse you. You see one package, it says antibiotic-free. Sounds good. Okay. Then, like 5 feet away, another one says antibiotic residue-free. So are they the same thing? Is one, better than the other? Is this just marketing games, or is there a real regulated difference here? That's what we're diving into today. We want to cut through that noise, figure out what these labels actually mean legally, what the difference really is, and crucially, what labels should you be looking for if you want chicken from a bird that never had antibiotics, ever?
Yeah, it's a really common point of confusion. Because antibiotic-free, it sounds like the gold standard, doesn't it? But when you actually dig into the definitions, you find something pretty surprising about the regulations. One of those labels, it's basically just stating the minimum legal requirement.
Okay, let's jump right in there then. That label we see, maybe most often, antibiotic residue free. It sounds quite technical. When a company puts that on the package, what are they actually required to do? What does it guarantee?
Well, here's the fascinating part. Antibiotic residue free isn't really a premium claim at all. It's basically the legal standard for pretty much all meat sold commercially. It just means the meat has passed the safety checks required for it to be sold.
How does that work? How do they guarantee it's residue-free?
It all comes down to something called the withdrawal period. See, regulators globally, they know that sometimes farm animals get sick and need antibiotics. That's just animal welfare. But they mandate that after an animal gets treated, there has to be a very specific, calculated amount of time. That's the withdrawal period before it can be processed for food. The whole idea is to give the animal's body enough time to metabolize and clear out the drug so there's no detectable residue left, or at least nothing above a very tiny legal limit.
Hold on. So you're telling me, when I see that big label shouting antibiotic residue free, all it really means is that the chicken met the basic legal requirement to be sold. Like, it passed the test.
Exactly right. It's a statement that it's compliant with food safety rules. It tells you nothing about whether the bird got antibiotics earlier in its life.
Okay. But then what about the other label, the antibiotic-free one? Sometimes you see that instead. Why have two different terms if they both just mean the chicken went through the withdrawal period and has no residues?
Well, that really gets into marketing, doesn't it? It's playing on what consumers think the term means. What the source material really highlights is that, legally speaking, for conventionally raised chicken, antibiotic-free and antibiotic residue-free often mean the exact same thing. Both just indicate that the withdrawal period was followed. Neither one guarantees the chicken lived its whole life without ever getting medicine.
Wow, okay. That's a really key distinction. So a chicken could have, say, been sick, gotten treated with antibiotics for a week or two, then waited out the withdrawal period and still end up in a package labeled antibiotic-free.
Precisely. And the meat would be considered safe by regulators. But this is where the conversation shifts, It goes from just talking about immediate safety, like, will this meat make me sick today, to thinking about longer-term health concerns. Because people looking for these labels often aren't just worried about residues right now. They're thinking about overall exposure.
Right, that makes sense. So if the regulators say the meat is safe, no harmful residues,
Yeah.
what's the actual worry for consumers then? Why should someone care if antibiotics were used way back as long as the withdrawal time was respected? So what?
Well, the concern is kind of twofold, really. It touches on both public health and our own bodies. First, even with all the testing, science does show that sometimes tiny, tiny traces levels, technically below the official limit, might still be present. And when you think about long-term cumulative exposure, even to these super low levels through diet, the main worry isn't usually about getting acutely sick. It's more about the subtle, ongoing effect these traces might have on our gut microbiome, the bacteria living in our digestive system. These low-level residues could potentially act as disruptors, maybe changing the balance or the diversity of our gut flora over time.
The microbiome, yeah, that's huge. But are those trace amounts really significant enough to cause problems?
Well, that ties into the second, maybe broader concern, antimicrobial resistance. Think about it. If you're constantly taking in even minuscule amounts of antibiotics, you could be creating a kind of selective pressure inside your own gut. It might theoretically encourage any bacteria already present in your system to develop low levels of resistance. Now, that's probably a tiny contribution from any one person, but it feeds into the much bigger global issue of antibiotics becoming less effective overall. So consumers looking for total exclusion are trying to step away from that whole cycle, even the low-level risk.
Okay, that completely reframes why someone would seek out these labels. It's not just about the immediate safety check. It's about wanting a fundamentally different way the animal was raised.
Yeah.
So this leads us right to the person who wants that absolute guarantee. The chicken was never treated, not once from the day it hatched. If antibiotic residue free, and often antibiotic free don't give you that guarantee, what labels actually do signal complete exclusion?
Right. If that's your goal, absolutely zero antibiotic use throughout the bird's entire life, you need to look past those standard residue claims. You need labels that certify the process of how the animal was raised, not just the end product.
And one of those labels.
There are basically three main ones to look for. They signal a very different production system. First, you have no antibiotics ever, often shortened to NAE. Second is raised without antibiotics, or RWA. And the third is the organic certification, USDA organic, for example. That certification also strictly prohibits antibiotic use, plus it has other rules about feed and living conditions. These aren't just marketing terms, they're usually verified by third parties and promise something about the entire farming practice.
NAE, RWA, and organic. Okay, that's the actionable takeaway right there. But let's dig into the how of these programs, especially NAE and RWA. What happens if, animals get sick, as bound to happen sometimes? If you have a whole flock under an NAE program and suddenly a bunch of chickens get an infection, does the farmer just let them suffer to keep the label? That seems ethically tricky.
No, absolutely not. And that's actually the critical protocol detail that really differentiates these programs and drives up the cost. Humane treatment always comes first. If a bird in an NAE or RWA program gets sick and a vet determines it needs antibiotics to recover, it must be treated.
Okay, so they treat it, but then what?
The moment that bird receives antibiotics, it's immediately and permanently kicked out of the NAE or RWA program. It has to be diverted.
Diverted, meaning what happens to it? Is it just discarded?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It simply gets moved out of that premium NAE or RWA group and sent into the conventional processing stream. It will eventually be sold just like any other chicken under that standard antibiotic residue-free label, the legal baseline we talked about. But here's the key for the farmer. They've likely spent more money raising that bird, maybe premium feed, better conditions, expecting the NAE price premium. But now, because it had to be treated, they only get the standard lower market price for it. They lose that premium.
Ah, okay. That explains the higher price for NAE or RWA chicken perfectly. You're not just paying for the label itself. You're essentially paying for the farmer's investment and success in keeping the entire flock healthy enough to avoid needing antibiotics in the first place. It's like an insurance premium for good farm management and biosecurity.
Exactly. It incentivizes practices that prioritize preventing illness naturally. And it's worth noting there are slight nuances between those premium labels. NAE and RWA focus specifically on the no antibiotics promise. Organic includes the no antibiotics rule, but also layers on extra requirements about what the chickens eat. It has to be organic, non-GMO feed, and how they live, like guaranteed access to the outdoors.
Yeah.
So while all three mean no antibiotics were used, organic certifies a broader set of farming standards.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. Let's synthesize the main takeaway for someone listening. We started out confused in that poultry aisle, but now the picture should be clearer. I think the absolute core learning is this. If your main concern is just that the chicken is legally safe to eat according to regulators, then pretty much any chicken you buy is fine. It meets the residue-free standard. But if you specifically want chicken from an animal that was never given antibiotics at any point in its life, you have to ignore those basic residue-free or even plain antibiotic-free labels and actively look for no antibiotics ever, raised without antibiotics, or organic.
That's the crux of it. And you also need to be ready for what that choice entails. Because of those strict rules we discussed, the farmer having to potentially take a loss on treated birds, the extra effort in prevention, these NAE, RWA, and organic products almost always cost more. And like we noted from the source, you might not find them everywhere. They're often in specific premium or natural food sections, reflecting that they're a more specialized product.
Right.
If you zoom out, this whole labeling maze really shows how tricky food labels can be. It puts the burden on you, the consumer, to kind of be a translator. You have to understand the difference between a label that's just confirming basic safety compliance, like residue-free, and a label that's promising a completely different, verified, and usually more expensive way of raising the animal, like NAE or organic.
That's a really clear and necessary distinction to make. Thanks for helping us finally make sense of that chicken aisle chaos.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought for you to consider, something to mull over. Think about that NAE system. The high cost is partly driven by that strict rule: treat sick birds, but then divert them and lose the premium price. So when you choose to buy that NAE chicken, are you paying a premium only for the potential benefit of avoiding antibiotic exposure yourself? Or are you also, in effect, financially supporting a system that guarantees that sick animals within that program will receive necessary medical treatment, even if it costs the farmer? It ensures humane care through diversion. It's an interesting angle, right? Paying for flock health management, which indirectly includes the cost of treating the ones that don't make the NAE cut. Something to chew on next time you're comparing those price tags.